Namaste, Dhanavad Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Shripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're also paying our humble Dhanavad Pranam to Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada for providing us this wonderful commentary and translation of the Bhagavatam, and following the guidance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, we are praying to Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati has told us that unless we can learn something about Radharani within our Bhagavatam study, then our study has been wasted if we haven't done that. Yadi seva vanchitasya ma yasya kripaya vayam labema sarvam prapnuma prayojanam damni Shri Bhagavat pade Krishna sambandhi sarvam cha yadi na jani mahe tutam ashtadashasu sahasreshu shlokanam Bhagavat oktishu Radharanim na vindamatada Nishfalam Bhagavatadhyayanam Radhi kaya kripam vina Vyartasyat sarva parishrama. If we are cheated out of serving that personality whose mercy awards us everything we need, including residence in the Lord's holy Dham, and all things connected to Krishna, and if we cannot understand or discover Radharani within the 18,000 verses of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, then our study of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam has been pointless. Without the mercy of Śrīmatī Rādhārāṇī, all of our efforts are in vain. So we are continuing from our reading from Canto 5, Chapter 11, Text 5. Savasanatma vishayo parakto guna pravaho vikrita sodashatma bibrat pratannam virupa bedam antarbhishtvam cha puraistanoti. Because the mind is absorbed in desires for pious and impious activities, it is naturally subjected to the transformations of lust and anger. In this way, it becomes attracted to material sense enjoyment. In other words, the mind is conducted by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. There are 11 senses and 5 material elements, and out of these 16 items, the mind is the chief. Therefore, the mind brings about birth in different types of bodies among demigods, human beings, animals, and birds. When the mind is situated in a higher or lower position, it accepts a higher or lower material body. Purport. Transmigration among the 8,400,000 species is due to the minds being polluted by certain material qualities. Due to the mind, the soul is subjected to pious and impious activities. The continuation of material existence is like the waves of material nature. In this regard, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Mayara vashe yatche beshe kacha habadu bubhai. My dear brother, the spirit soul is completely under the control of Maya, and you are being carried away by its waves. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Prakrute kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the 3 modes of material nature, thinks himself the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by nature, Bhagavad Gita 3.27. Material existence means being fully controlled by material nature. The mind is the center for accepting the dictations of material nature. In this way, the living entity is carried away in different types of bodies continuously, millennium after millennium. Krishna Buli Sei Jiva Anadi Bahirmukha Ateva Maya Tare Deya Samsara Dukkha. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 20.117. Due to the living entity's forgetfulness of Krishna, one is bound by the laws of material nature. Text 6. Dukkam Shukam Vyatiriktam Chativram Kalo Papanam Phalam Avyanakti Alingya Maya Rachitan Taratma Swadehinam Samshriti Chakrakuta. The materialistic mind, covering the living entity's soul, carries it to different species of life. This is called continued material existence. Due to the mind, the living entity suffers or enjoys material distress and happiness. Being thus illusioned, the mind further creates pious and impious activities and their karma, and thus the soul becomes conditioned. Purport. Mental activities under the influence of material nature cause happiness and distress within the material world. Being covered by illusion, the living entity eternally continues conditioned life under different designations. Such living entities are known as Nitya Baddha, eternally conditioned. On the whole, the mind is the cause of conditioned life. Therefore, the entire yogic process is meant to control the mind and the senses. If the mind is controlled, the senses are automatically controlled, and therefore the soul is saved from the reactions of pious and impious activity. If the mind is engaged at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, Savaya Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo, the senses are automatically engaged in the Lord's service. When the mind and senses are engaged in devotional service, the living entity naturally becomes Krishna conscious. As soon as one always thinks of Krishna, he becomes a perfect yogi, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Yoginam api sarvesham madgatin atmaratmana. Bhagavad Gita 6.47. This antaratma, the mind, is conditioned by material nature. As stated here, Maya Rachinat Taratma Svadehinam Samshriti Chakrakuta. The mind, being most powerful, covers the living entity and puts him in the waves of material existence. Text 7. Tavan ayam vyavahara sadhivai kshetragya saksho bhavati stula sukshma tasman manolingam adho vadanti guna gunatvasya paravarsharasya. The mind makes the living entity within this material world, wander through the different species of life, and thus the living entity experiences mundane affairs in different forms as a human being, a demigod, a fat person, a skinny person, and so forth. Learned scholars say that bodily appearance, bondage, and liberation are caused by the mind. Purport. Purport. Just as the mind is the cause of bondage, it can also be the cause of liberation. The mind is described here as para avara. Para means transcendental, and avara means material. When the mind is engaged in the Lord's service, sabhaya mana Kṛṣṇa padara vindayo, it is called para, transcendental. When the mind is engaged in material sense gratification, it is called avara, or material. At the present moment, in our conditioned state, our mind is fully absorbed in material sense gratification, but it can be purified and brought to its original Krishna consciousness by the process of devotional service. We have often given the example of Ambarish Maharaj. Sabhaya mana Kṛṣṇa padara vindayor vachamsi vaikunta gunanuvarnani. The mind must be controlled in Krishna consciousness. The tongue can be utilized to spread the message of Krishna and glorify the Lord, or take prasad, the remnants of food offered to Krishna. Sevan mukhe hi jivado. When one utilizes the tongue in the service of the Lord, the other senses can become purified. As stated in the Narada Pancharatra, Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 19.170. When the mind and senses are purified, one's total existence is purified, and one's designations are also purified. One no longer considers himself a human being, a demigod, cat, dog, Hindu, Muslim, and so forth. When the senses and mind are purified, and one is fully engaged in Krishna's service, one can be liberated and return home back to Godhead. Text 8. Text 8. Gunhanuraktam vyasanaya janto vashanaya janto chemaya nargunyam ato manasyat yata pradipo grita vartim asnan shikha sadhuma bhajati hyanyadasvam padam tatta guna karmanu badham vritir manashrayate nyatra tattvam. When the living entity's mind becomes absorbed in the sense gratification of the material world, it brings about his conditioned life and suffering within the material situation. However, when the mind becomes unattached to material enjoyment, it becomes the cause of liberation. When the flame in a lamp burns the wick improperly, the lamp is blackened. But when the lamp is filled with ghee and is burning properly, there is bright illumination. Similarly, when the mind is absorbed in material sense gratification, it causes suffering. And when detached from material sense gratification, it brings about the original brightness of Krishna consciousness. Purport. It is therefore concluded that the mind is the cause of material existence and liberation also. Everyone is suffering in this material world because of the mind. It is therefore proper to train the mind, or to cleanse the mind, from material attachment and engage it fully in the Lord's service. This is called spiritual engagement, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samitit yaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Bhagavad Gita 14.26. We should engage the mind fully in Krishna conscious activities. Then it will be the cause of our liberation for our returning home, back to Godhead. However, if we keep the mind engaged in material activities for sense gratification, it will cause continuous bondage and will make us remain in this material world in different bodies, suffering the consequences of our different actions. Text 9. Ekadasha sanmanaso hi vritaya akutaya panchadiyo bimana matrani karmani puram chatasam vadanti haikatasa virabhumi. There are 5 working senses and 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. There is also the false ego. In this way, there are 11 items for the mind's functions. O hero, the objects of the senses, such as sound and touch, the organic activities, such as evacuation, and the different types of bodies, society, friendship, and personality, are considered by learned scholars the fields of activity for the functions of the mind. Purport. The mind is the controller of the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses and the 5 working senses. Each sense has its particular field of activity. In all cases, the mind is the controller or owner. By the false ego, one thinks oneself the body, and thinks in terms of my body, my house, my family, my society, my nation, and so on. These false identifications are due to the expansions of the false ego. Thus one thinks that he is this or that. Thus the living entity becomes entangled in material existence. So thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 10 on Friday. Before we finish, were there any comments or questions or anything to share from the assembled devotees? Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Shripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Tirtha Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Shri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai.
Jai.
All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees. Sama Bhaktiveda Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai,
Jai.
Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai,
Jai.
Giri Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai,
Jai.
Shyam Kund Radha Kund Ki Jai,
Jai.
Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Scientific Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai, Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Ki Jai.
Jai.
Nitai Gaura Premanandi Hari 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 Bol.
Haribol.
Jai Śrīmati Tulsi Maharani Devi Dasi Ki Jai.
Jai.
Bhakta Shivam Ki Jai, Bhakta Chirag Ki Jai.
Jai. Jai.
Jai Tirobhav Mahamahotsav, Srila Mahesh Pandit, and Srila Udaran Das Thakur ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
And Jai Kṛṣṇa Keśav Das ki Jai.
Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavad.
No.